to find himself outside the car, standing on his own 2 feet. Nina shut the door behind him. Trey took a deep breath. He started to clench his fists out of habit and fear, a habit of fear, a fear-filled habit, and only stopped when pain reminded him that he was still clutching the sheaf of papers he'd taken from a dead man's desk. He glanced down and saw a thin line of fresh blood, stark and frightening on the bright white paper. Trey's next breath was sharp and panicked. Had someone shot him? Was he in even greater danger than he'd imagined? His ears buzzed, and he thought he might pass out from terror, but nothing else happened, and after a few moments, his mind cleared a little. He looked at the blood again. It was barely more than a single drop. Okay, Trey steadied himself. You just had a panic attack over a paper cut. Let's not be telling anybody about that, all right? A paper cut indoors would have been no big deal, but outdoors? Outdoors, the need to breathe was enough to panic him. He forced himself to breathe anyway, and by sheer dint of will, Trey made himself take a single step forward, and then another, and another. Mr. Talbot had a long, long walkway between the street and his house, and the chauffeur had inconveniently parked off to the side under a clump of trees that practically hid the car from the house. Trey considered turning around, getting back into the car and telling the chauffeur to pull up closer, say, onto the Talbots' front porch. But that would mean retracing his steps, and Trey felt like he'd already come so far. Maybe even all of 3 feet. With part of his mind, Trey knew he was being foolish, a total baby, a chicken, a fear-addled idiot. It's not my fault, Trey defended himself. It's all conditioning. I can't help the way I was raised. And that was the understatement of the year. For most of his 13 years, Trey hadn't had control over any aspect of his life. He was an illegal third child. The entire government thought he had no right to exist, so he'd had to hide from birth until age 12, in a single room. And then, when he was almost 13, when his father died, "You don't have time to think about that now," Trey told himself sternly. "Walk." He took a few more steps forward, propelled now by a burning anger that he'd never managed to escape. His mind slipped back to a multiple-choice test question he'd been asking himself for more than a year. Whom do you hate? A. Him. B. Her. C. Yourself. It never worked to add extra choices. D. All of the above. E. A and B. F. A and C. Or G. B and C. Because then the question just became, who do you hate the most? Stop it, Trey commanded himself. Just pretend you're Lee. Trey's friend Lee had been an illegal third child like Trey. But Lee had grown up out in the country, on an isolated farm, so he'd been able to spend plenty of time outdoors. He'd almost, Trey thought, grown up normal. As much as Trey feared and hated being outdoors, Lee craved it. How can you stand it? Trey had asked Lee once. Why aren't you terrified? Don't you ever think about the danger? I guess not, Lee had said, shrugging. When I'm outdoors, I look at the sky and the grass and the trees, and I guess that's all I think about. Trey looked at the sky and the grass and the trees around him, and all he could think was, Lee should be here, walking up to Mr. Talbot's door, instead of me. Lee had been in the car with Trey and Nina and Joel and John until just about 10 minutes earlier, but Lee had had the chauffeur drop him and another boy, Smits, off at a crossroads in the middle of nowhere because Lee had said, I have to get Smits to safety. Trey suspected that Lee was taking Smits home, to Lee's parents' house, but Trey was trying very hard not to think that. It was too dangerous, even thinking